So with only 7 or so games remaining of this championship season, it's time that I made my final league table predictions. Let's jump into them. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. We are very much here at the final hurdle of this championship season, and the majority of teams have either 7, 8 or 9 games left, so I thought it was about time, now that we're in an international break, for me to give my final verdicts on where I see each club finishing this season. Now, for the most part of this video, we will be focusing on the bottom 3 and top 6, but we will fill in all those clubs in the middle of the table as well. As always though, if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular championship content. Without any further ado though, let's jump into this one. So we'll start out with the relegation picture, and I'm going to be a little bit boring here, and I'm going to predict it as it currently stands at this point in time. I've flipped around Derby and Peterborough, but apart from that, I do think that the current bottom 3 will be the 3 sides going down at the end of the season. And I must admit, I have done a little bit of a flip of my opinion after the last game week we had before the international break. I think that win Reading got against Blackburn sort of twisted my mind a little bit. We'll go through each of the clubs though. I have got Peterborough at the foot of the table, despite that great win away at QPR last time. I think that Peterborough throughout the season have been quite erratic, and to be honest, I would have liked to see a Peterborough side who decided to offload Darren Ferguson maybe earlier on in the season, make that switch to Grant McCann, and maybe they could have got out of this situation, but I think it'll be the case of leaving it a little bit too late, and there'll be too much inconsistency, as has been the case throughout the season. The same could probably be said for Derby at this point. I do think that Derby are by far and away the best team out of these 4 here. Obviously the 21 point deduction has been absolutely crippling for them in the end, and there was that point of the season where it looked like Derby had it in them fully to survive, but this recent run of, I think, 1 win in their last 7 matches has ultimately left them with so much ground to make up on the teams above them. You know, it's an 8-point gap that Derby need to make up from this point onwards to Reading, and if Reading even managed to win, 1, 2 matches remaining of the season and get a couple of draws along the way, that suddenly becomes an impossible gap for Derby to go ahead and reach. In terms of the club that I have the most hopes of survival out of the teams that are currently in the bottom 3, I would probably place my hopes on Barnsley, but I think absolutely everything rides on the game straight after the international break at Oakwell between Barnsley and Reading. That is an absolutely huge match, but like I said, I have done a little bit of a flip of my opinion after Reading got that win against Blackburn, because it just paints the picture a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that Reading go into that game against Barnsley needing a win. Actually, a draw kind of suits them now. Home form for all these 4 sides will be massive between now and the end of the season, because all 4 of them have been pretty useless on the road so far this season. They all rank within the bottom 4 in terms of away records, and I look at Reading's remaining home matches, and they've actually got some favourable matches against sides who don't really have anything to play for. They've got games against Stoke, Cardiff, Swansea and West Brom all at home. If they manage to win 2 of those games, suddenly they're on 39 points, and that is probably going to be enough, around that 40-point mark, and I think Reading will be alright this season. So listen, if they lose to Barnsley, my opinion could flip again, but for the time being, that's my bottom 4. We'll fill up this chunk of the table next, and I've not done all too much tinkering with this part of the table either. I think it'll stay fairly similar. To be honest, with a lot of these teams, you could jumble them in any order. None of them really have anything to play for from this point onwards, and so teams heading towards the beach and that sort of thing, I think will start to apply to all these teams after the international break. But I've gone for Hull in 20th, then Birmingham, Bristol City, Swansea, Stoke and Cardiff. I think inconsistent would be the perfect way to sum up definitely Hull, Birmingham and Bristol City at this point. You could arguably probably chuck Swansea into that as well. I think they have had quite a few highs and lows throughout the season, and to be honest, I think that what could be massive for both Cardiff and Swansea in terms of their momentum for the rest of the season is what actually happens in the fixture between those 2 sides, because a big Derby Day victory can really go ahead and spur you on for the rest of the season, and a loss in that game can sort of make you feel a little bit deflated even when you don't have anything to play for the rest of the season. Stoke, I think, could continue to falter as the year goes on. They got a win just before the international break, but that was their first win in their last 9 matches. An inconsistent pattern which would lead me to lean towards a sort of 16th place finish. And then I've gone for Cardiff in 15th, who I just think maybe under Morrison, with how they've performed in the second half of the season, have a little bit more sort of the ability to grind out results for the rest of the season. I trust them to be, dare I say, a little bit more consistent than the sides I've pipped to finish below them. 14th and 13th, I've gone for Blackpool and Preston North End. I don't think there'll be much in it between us two this season. There's 1 point in it at the moment, and Blackpool do have a game in hand, to be fair. But looking at the run-ins for both clubs, it's fairly similar from now on in. Obviously, neither team really has anything to play for at this point either. I think in terms of who finishes high between these two, it probably will come down to that game at Deepdale. Under the lights, it should be a cracking atmosphere. I think regardless of what happens between now and the end of the season, though, both sets of fans will be going into next season with a sense of optimism, dare I say, with a potential takeover on the horizon for North End. Ryan Lowe restoring the feel-good factor to us, and Blackpool being as competitive as they have been, you know, knocking shoulders with the top half of the Championship, with this being their first season back in the Championship. So yeah, I think that one probably will come down to a point or two. I don't think there'll be much in it, but bring on the game at Deepdale is what I say. Next up, I'll chuck in West Brom and Coventry, because after this we sort of get into the proper playoff contenders. I think that West Brom and Coventry have probably left things a little bit too late in terms of a top six charge, and both teams probably have too much of an air of inconsistency about them at this point in time. You know, we saw West Brom have that fantastic performance and result against Fulham, but couldn't follow it up and were quite subpar against Bristol City, and Coventry themselves have been a little bit up and down, particularly in this second half of the season. So coming in 10th place, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I've got QPR. They've got really quite a tough run-in to come for the rest of the season, and if we look at the way they're playing at the moment, the players who will be missing for the rest of the season, I think QPR's top six hopes have sort of dissolved in front of all of our eyes, really. It's only 2 wins from their last 9 matches, but what's been most concerning is the underlying performances under those results. If a turning point in their season was going to happen, maybe it could have been off the back of that Luton game, which was, to be honest, a little bit of a smash and grab. Still, the performance wasn't entirely convincing in that game, but it was followed up by back-to-back 3-1 defeats, and after the international break, they come into games against Fulham, followed by Sheffield United. After that, they've still got the reverse fixture to play against Sheffield United, a tough away game at Huddersfield as well. I think their running's looking really quite tricky compared to the other teams around them. Factor in that Chris Willock's going to be missing for the rest of the season, the goalkeeper crisis that they've had recently as well. I just can't see it anymore for QPR, and it's a shame because they peaked really well in the first half of the season, but the second half of the season has been quite the slump. In 9th place, I've gone for Blackburn Rovers, another team who peaked really early on into the season, but 2022 has been such a fall back down to reality for Rovers. If we look at the form table for this calendar year, Blackburn are 17th in the league, having only scored 6 goals this calendar year, which is by far and away the lowest amount in the Championship. No one else has failed to hit double figures so far this season. We thought that maybe that second half shown against Derby could have been a bit of a turning point for Blackburn in terms of turning their season around, but it was followed up by that disappointing 1-0 defeat before the international break. The only thing that Blackburn do have going in their favour is the potential return of Brereton Diaz coming back, and the fact that their fixture running compared to everyone else in the Championship in and around the top 6 isn't exactly awful, but Blackburn have really failed to play the circumstances so far this season, and even in some of the perceived easy matches for Blackburn, they've still come up struggling. In the first half of the season, Blackburn were scoring goals at quite an unsustainable rate in terms of the quality of chances that they were creating and the amount of goals that they were scoring, and it seems like those numbers have just caught up with them at the wrong time, really. Now next up, I've gone for Millwall in 8th, but from this point onwards, I'm really quite unsure, to be honest, and I certainly wouldn't rule out a Millwall top 6 finish at this point in the season. Yes, they had that really disappointing loss to Stoke just before the international break, but prior to that, we're on an absolutely fantastic unbeaten run. You know, they were the team that put an end to Huddersfield's incredible unbeaten run, and looking at their fixtures for the rest of the season, yes, they come back to a very tough game away at Luton at Kenilworth Road, but after that, they've got games against Swansea, Barnsley, Preston, Hull, Birmingham, Peterborough, all of which are incredibly winnable for this Millwall side, who don't tend to give all too much away to the opposition. Listen, we've seen Millwall go on some fantastic runs throughout this season, and if they can find their consistency, maybe get a point away at Luton and find their consistency after that fixture, I'm certainly not ruling out a top 6 finish here for Millwall, but I just think the sides above them may have a little bit more about them. In 7th place, and this is where things start to get really close for me, I've gone for Middlesbrough, but a part of me thinks that they will make the top 6 this season, and this part of the table is going to come down to such fine margins. I do think it'll be the case where you know, between 7th and 6th we end up with 1 point, maybe it's a separation on goal difference or something like that. I've just pipped one side to finish above them in 6th, and I've gone for Borough in 7th. I was quite 50-50 between who I have above Borough and Middlesbrough actually finishing in 7th. But for Middlesbrough, listen, since Chris Wilder's come in, he's been absolutely fantastic. I trust in their home form. There are still a few parts of this Borough side, though, that I do have my questions over, particularly in maybe the big matches that Borough still have left to play. You know, they've still got games against Fulham, Bournemouth and Huddersfield in quite close proximity in April, which are all tough matches. Still got my question marks over Joe Lumley and the business they did in January. Listen, maybe, you know, both Conley and Balogun got on the score sheet against Birmingham, so maybe that's the, you know, the proper start to life at Middlesbrough for them, and then, you know, consistently producing goals for the rest of the season. But still got a few question marks over those matches, and I think they've got perhaps a mistake in them on the road as well, where maybe there's a little bit more consistency of the teams above them. I don't know. This one's going to be really close. They do have games in hand on the teams above them as well, which is absolutely massive at this point in the season. So just pipping Middlesbrough to that 6th place, I've gone for Huddersfield, who are really quite an interesting team at the moment because they went on that miraculous unbeaten run and it was followed up by back-to-back defeats against Millwall and Bournemouth, both games which they failed to score. It did feel like the international break has come at a decent time actually for this Huddersfield squad, so that they can regroup as a team, get back to what they were doing best before those defeats. And dare I say it, I think they've got slightly a better running than Middlesbrough do, albeit Middlesbrough have 2 games in hand on Huddersfield and they're currently 4 points behind them. So this part of the table is such fine margins to go ahead and predict. And I think what's most interesting is that towards the end of April, these two sides are meeting. Middlesbrough versus Huddersfield at the Riverside. That right there could be a top 6 decider. I just think that maybe Huddersfield have it in them to be a little bit more consistent from this point onwards, but I could be proven wrong there. Coming in 5th place, I'm going to go for Nathan Jones's Luton Town. They're currently flying high in 3rd in the Championship at this point in time. A couple of fantastic results as well just before the international break. Absolutely smashed my side, Preston North End, put 4 goals past us and then put 3 past Hull just before the break as well. Do still have some tricky fixtures coming up, to be fair, Luton, so I'm not going to go for a top 3 finish. They've still got games against the likes of Millwall, Huddersfield, Forest and Fulham still to come. But I think there's just a feeling around Luton at the moment. I think that the chances they're creating, their goal-scoring numbers in terms of chances created in XG has always been quite promising throughout the season, even when they were sort of around 10th to 12th in the table. So I like the way the club's been run. I think that from a neutral perspective, a lot of people are going to be rooting for Luton here. I do think they make it into the top 6 from this point onwards, which will be a massive achievement. Coming in 4th place, I've then gone for Steve Cooper's Nottingham Forest. When it comes to Steve Cooper in the Championship, he just knows how to get a side into the top 6. They're currently on the longest unbeaten run in the Championship as well, of 7 matches, and they've only played 36 games this season, so do have several games in hand on the teams above them. And I think their fixture run-in is looking fairly decent. They've still got a few tricky matches to come, but with the level of consistency that we've seen from Forest recently, I am backing them to get into the top 6 at this point in time. The only thing that could potentially derail a top 6 finish is the injury list, which is starting to accumulate now for Forest, particularly in those defensive positions. And we all know how a Steve Cooper side is built from the back upwards. Lowe's been out with that long-term injury, but recently we've also had the likes of Steve Cook and Scott McKenna both added to that injury list, which I think is quite the blow for Nottingham Forest when we consider how Steve Cooper likes to play football. I think they've got the options in the squad though to go ahead and deal with that, and I think that when I compare Forest pound for pound with the other teams around them, I am going to back them to get into the top 6. Like I say though, the only thing that could potentially throw a spanner in the works is these recent injuries, which haven't helped things. 3rd place then, I've gone for Sheffield United, but to be honest, I don't think there'll be a great deal between 6th and 3rd place. I think it'll be as it is now. There'll only be 1 or 2 points in it, which does make the actual playoffs really quite an interesting spectacle, because I think that what we'll get is 4 quite evenly matched sides actually, but I've gone for Sheffield United as the best of the rest and just missing out on automatic promotion. I do think that Paul Heckingbottom deserves quite a bit of praise, to be honest, considering where he took over this Sheffield United squad from, the football they're now playing, the consistency that they've now managed to pick up, albeit, okay, I know there have been a few sort of clangers here and there, you know, that Coventry game being one of them, but they bounced back from that with 4 points from their last 2 matches. At Bramall Lane, they're seriously consistent at the moment. They don't really concede goals there. I think it's fair to say that Sheffield United probably have a little bit more star power in the final third than the other teams in the top 6, which is why I've just pipped them to finish in this third spot. I think that even when maybe they don't play all too well, someone like a Morgan Gibbs-White can come up with a moment of magic out of nothing. So yeah, gone for Sheffield United in third, but I think that it'll be any ordering of those top 6 really. And so coming in second place, I have gone for Bournemouth. Don't get me wrong, I've still got some reservations about Bournemouth in terms of performance levels, a level of inconsistency as well, and what does make things quite interesting is their fixture running is probably the hardest out of any Championship club for the rest of the season. They've still got to play the likes of West Brom, Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, Coventry, Fulham, Blackburn, Nottingham Forest and Millwall, so it really is quite a stinking run-in, but I do think that Bournemouth already have enough credit in the bank. They've already got a 6-point lead over Luton, who are in third at the moment. They've got at least 2 games in hand on all the teams below them as well. And speaking of star quality, Bournemouth have that in absolute abundance. I think the 3-0 win against Huddersfield as well was a real sort of nerve settler for the Bournemouth fans just before the international break. I'm not sure any of the teams below them are going to pick up points from now on to a level of consistency where they'll be able to surpass Bournemouth at this point. I think it would have to be a massive collapse from Bournemouth from this point onwards, I really do. But that of course means coming in first place and unexpectedly so, we of course have Fulham finishing as the champions this season, which I think will be the most popular prediction of all. It will be interesting to see what sort of points tally Fulham are finishing on for the rest of the season, and what I'm quite interested to see as well is if they're going to break any records in terms of their goal scoring numbers. They're well on track to score over 100 goals this season, which will be fantastic, but Fulham are cruising towards the Premier League at this point onwards. No one's coming close to them. But there we have it guys, those are my Championship predictions for how I see the table finishing at the end of the season. I think it's going to be a really close one around several parts of the table, but that for me is how I see it finishing. This is a game all about opinions though, and I want to get your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Which picks do you agree with, who do you disagree with, who's going up this season, and who is going down? There we have it though guys, apart from that will now wrap it up for today's video, so if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.